Alright, so we're going to begin Parashat Lecha. It's the third parasha. And the focus of this parasha is about Abraham Avinu. He's our patriarch. He's the Amud HaChesed. He's considered the pillar of kindness. He was also revolutionary because the philosophy that he taught, his teachings were completely contrary to what everybody else believed in those days. He was a very, very special man. Obviously, he was endowed with a very, very special soul. But it's not enough for one to have a special soul. We all have free will. That's very important to remember. So it definitely takes a lot of hard work from one to develop a strong relationship with the God, to be able to be giving to others, even though you may believe in it, even though you understand that it's right. That's very nice, but to actually practice it, to practice what we preach, is not a simple matter. To better understand what kind of a generation Abraham Avinu lived in, we need to have a little bit of background. Maimonides, the Rambam, explains a little bit, how is it that those generations back then who were much closer to creation moved away from belief in God? They were aware of it in the very beginning. How did they begin to worship idols or a multitude of gods? How did this all begin? So he gives a brief synopsis of how back then everyone understood that somehow the stars, the constellations, had power. They were great astrologers. They understood that. They had a tradition. To them it was a fact. And they figured, since these are servants of God, they need to be worshipped as well. The problem is that with time, they only worshipped the servants and they forgot about the master, the one who created all of this, the one who's really in charge. So as a result of focusing only on the servants and all these multitudes of powers, if we can call them so, they forgot about who created the world. That their creator is really one power who created everything, who's in charge of everything. And you had many religions over time, including in Persia, that believed that there are two gods or two powers, one that does good and one that does bad. They saw day, they saw night, they saw peace, they saw war, they saw all kinds of opposites, things that don't make sense, that should be created by the same power, the same God. So they actually believed in a power that does good and a power that does bad. Even later on, the Greeks, who understood that there is a great power behind the creation of the world, they did not believe that this great power was involved in what goes on in this world. He created the world, but this is a great power that does not get involved in all the details, who pays attention to all the creatures. That man should be able to turn to this power, to pray to him, and that he would listen, that was completely foreign to them. That was not something that they ascribed to. It was therefore not something very acceptable that one should be able to relate to this great God. Let's take this one step further. That this great God performs miracles, that he can change one's mazal. They understood what mazal is. At least some of them did. That people are born under a certain star, people have a certain destiny, and that is somewhat influenced by the stars. Many of them understood that. Astrology is an old science. Still, that one can change this mazal, that was not something so simple that everybody was willing to accept. They were bothered by many contradictions. They couldn't figure out why, for example, should it be that those people who are good and behave themselves should have a difficult life, those people who are evil and bad should have it easy. So there were all kinds of religions that emerged, all kinds of philosophies that came about as a result of all these ideas that did not make sense to people. They did not have a clear tradition. The problem is also that they did not give it too much thought. If people were to begin to think and to analyze, they would hopefully gain a lot more clarity. But little by little, they just followed the tradition of idols. That was a tradition, that became a tradition. And little by little they forgot about the basics, that there is a great God that runs this show, that life is purposeful, that even though you see things that are contradictory, it's all ultimately for some good, and it all originates from the same source, from the same God. The big problem, however, is since God does conceal himself, he doesn't make it too obvious, what happens is that man takes center attention. And man, in many ways, became God, or at least he thought so. Some of them did so. But they're God. And what you have is many, many cultures and civilizations vying for power. That's all they care about. Many conflicts, many wars, and it's all about who is more powerful, who conquers more lands. That's all that's on their mind, is power, might. Who will rule? All personal interest. When man becomes the center of attention, when God is not around or not so involved, then that's what man is going to think about. What will give me the power? How will I be able to control others, making them my slaves? All things that have to do with personal interest, personal gain. Till this very day, and especially today, in a very physical, materialistic world, people think about themselves. What can they do to improve their personal life, to be more comfortable, to be happier, supposedly? People think about themselves, but what about God? God is lacking in the lives of many, many people because they don't think he exists. Therefore, this problem was pretty much around from the very, very beginning, when even though they did attribute many powers to all these gods that they believed had some power, still, in the end, they thought about themselves. What can this God do for me? How can I derive benefit from these powers? Until Abraham came to the scene. Abraham Avinu taught, represented a whole different philosophy. Something that was completely not well understood then. He focused on doing chesed, doing for others, not for yourself. Life is not just about your own personal gain, your own self-interest. It's about doing for others too. This is what this God does. The whole act of creation is one act of love, of kindness from God. Therefore, this is what he wants of us, and this is what Abraham Avinu taught. Sensitivity towards others. Therefore, he went out of his way to teach a faith of monotheism, that there's only one God, not many, many gods. Because it was the fault or the mistake of the belief in many, many gods that you can almost invent anything you want. But once you narrowed it down to God is one, he's responsible for everything, it was easier to focus properly. What does this one God want from us? And he definitely doesn't want us to think about ourselves. There's something that he wants that has nothing to do with ourselves. It has to do with his world, his creation. This creation that he made, a beautiful creation, has a purpose. And part of that purpose is for people to be kind to each other, to be good to each other, to work together, to cooperate, not to make war and to conquer more lands. This is not what the ambition should be. This is not the goal of life. This is definitely not what God had in mind. He also taught something incredible that people somewhat began to believe. Man's possessions, man's children, whether he will have them, his soulmate, who he will marry, all of these things are not totally dependent on his ishtadlut, on his effort. He will not decide whether he will buy something, own something, have something. It depends on his mazal. As the Midrash says, Abraham Avinu was a great astrologer. He was a very knowledgeable astrologer. He knew about mazal. And he realized, and he taught this, that it's not completely up to us whether we succeed in life or not. In worldly possessions, that is. Spiritually speaking, whether one becomes a good man or a bad man, that is much more up to us. That has to do with free will. But how man does in the physical world, how many houses he will own, how many children he will have, what kind of children, who he will marry, that is not up to him. That is up to his mazal. So because of the philosophy that he taught, Abraham is called Abraham HaIvri, the Hebrew. Now, the Hebrew in English doesn't tell you too much. What does Hebrew mean? But in the holy language, Ivri means two things. He's called Ivri because he was from the other side of the Euphrates River. Mi'ever, Nahar, that's where he lived. That's where he taught. So Ivri, from the other side of the Euphrates. And Ivri also means the whole world is on one side and he is on the other side. Completely opposite from the rest of the world. As I said before, he was a revolutionary. What he taught was completely different than what they believed in. Now, how did he come to that? Where did Abraham Avinu get all this knowledge from? How did he decide that there's only one God? So, of course, we are taught that he had a revelation. But he didn't just have a revelation because God says, I'm going to give you a revelation. He, on his own, also searched for meaning. If people want to search for meaning, then they will receive divine assistance. It doesn't just happen by itself. So he analyzed and he wondered as a small child. And his dad didn't like it in the beginning. But neither did the king like it. He posed a danger. Those kinds of beliefs that were contrary to the beliefs that were prevalent back then posed a danger to the society, to the king. The king is no longer God. There's a greater God than him. All of these kinds of teachings therefore put him in danger. And he had to basically run away, leave where he grew up. And of course, during his trip on the road, on the way to Israel, where he's being eventually told to go to, Eretz Canaan, as it's called back then, he's teaching people. And he's convincing them to believe in only one God, not in a multitude of gods. He was successful. He was able to influence many people. As the verse says, they succeeded, him and his wife, Sarah, to convert many people to this one belief. What a lot of people don't understand about Abraham Avinu is how he actually was able to learn everything he did. Here we're saying that he has some revelation from God. Yes, it's true. God revealed to him certain things. But one of the biggest teachers that Abraham Avinu had were his nisyonot, his tests and challenges. Everybody heard about the tests Abraham Avinu experienced. Many, many tests from the very beginning. Even at the age of 99, we'll talk about it soon, he has a test, circumcision. He's being tested all along. What is the purpose of a test? You know, when people talk about a test, it's usually we want to know if somebody can do something. We don't know, we test him. But God knows. God doesn't have to test us to know or to find out something. God knows that Abraham Avinu is sincere, he's devoted, he's for real. So what does he have to put him through all kinds of tests? What do the tests do? Test is also good. It also enables one to gain reward. It's true. If one passes a test, yes, he will be rewarded for it. But that's not the main reason for it. Even though it's true that if one passed a test from above, he will be rewarded greatly for it. But besides the reward, a test enables an individual to grow spiritually. Had he not gone through the test, through that experience, he would have been on the same level he was for many, many years. A lower level. As a result of the test, successfully passing the test, it elevates him to a new status, to a higher status, spiritually speaking. With Abraham Avinu, he is not only elevated, the tests actually prepare him for his future mission. We all have a mission. We all have a task to perform. So we need training. We need something that will prepare us for this big day that will come one day. So various things that happen to us in our life, we don't know this, we're not even aware of it, but they are intended to prepare us. As a result of going through some difficult challenge, we're stronger. We're able to face other challenges in the future. We're able to deal with problems in a better and a more intelligent way. So all the tests that Avraham Avinu goes through are also designed, intended for him to be able to become stronger, to be able to deal with all kinds of challenges in the future, and to be able to perform his mission, whatever it may be. Part of that mission, we just said before, was to be kind to others, to teach them how important it is kindness. So he is very much an example of one who had guests over in his house. Achnasat orchim, the mitzvah of having guests, he's an excellent example that the Torah describes in detail how it meant so much to him. It was important to him. You don't see that so much with Yitzchak or Yaakov, even though Yitzchak and Yaakov, I'm sure, were very special in their own way, and they also performed this mitzvah of kindness in their way. But he is the epitome, as they would say in English. Avraham Avinu, the epitome who represents kindness. And therefore, everything about what he does is sensitivity towards others, wanting to have a guest, insisting on people staying over. You know, sometimes people offer, but they don't insist. You know what? Fine. He insisted. It meant so much to him. But it's not so much only to him. He realized the importance of it, that God wants this, and that is part of his mission. So he's definitely preoccupied with the welfare of others in more than one way. That is part of his mission. One way, or one of the challenges that Avraham Avinu learns a great deal, is the fact that he did not have children for a long time. Right? Until he was very, very old, he had no children. So what is the Kadosh Baruch Hu teaching him? I usually explain that tests or challenges teach us all kinds of things. For example, the Jewish people, when they were 40 years in the desert, they were taught. They were taught by the fact that they had no water for a number of days until they begged God, is, listen, in the future, when you don't have a Moses, you don't have a prophet, you're not directly hearing God, what are you going to do if there's no water? You're going to turn to him, you're going to pray to him. So the Jewish people needed all sorts of lessons in the 40 years of the desert to become accustomed on how to relate to all kinds of situations in the future when they don't have a direct link to God like they had back then. So challenges, no matter what they are, will always be lessons. So here, Abraham and Sarah have no children. What does that teach them? God teaches them, listen, you know what? You have no children according to your mazal, correct? Abraham says, yes, you are going to have children. So Abraham Avinu says in the Midrash, I don't understand. How could that be? I checked it out. I checked out my mazal, and the mazal basically does not have any children. So Hashem tells him, that's right, according to your mazal, you have no children. But let me teach you something. I can change your mazal. Oh God, you can change the mazal of a person? Of course. I can do anything I want. What does God do? He adds a letter to Avram. Avram becomes Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah. He changes her name. He changes the name of the two of them. Once their names are changed, they have children together. Even though Abraham has children from Hagar, that's something different. But for the two of them to have together children, their mazal has to be changed. You see? God says, if you pray to me, I can change mazal. So therefore, even though mazal is something very, very strong, it binds us. And the reason why it binds us is because that's part of our mission. When we talk about a mission, we talk about we're given the tools to accomplish this mission. So we're put in a certain place. We're given certain characteristics. And I talk about it in the series on astrology, how everyone is so different, because that is part of his tafkid, part of his mission in life. So a mazal is usually pretty strict. It needs to be a certain way. Comes along Avraham Avinu and learns through his own mazal of not having children that even this kind of a mazal, it's possible to change. God can do it. He didn't know that. Abraham Avinu didn't know many things. He learned it through the nisyonot, through the tests and challenges that he had. He could have complained. He could have said, I don't believe. And Hashem says, no, I can make a small change to your name. That will be enough to change your mazal. And sure enough, he had children after that. So this is not just a lesson for Abraham. This is, of course, a lesson for us to learn from. Hashem did this to Abraham Avinu so that we can learn from it. That even though a person is born in a certain mazal, he can change that mazal. Later on, Hashem tells him, what I'm telling you to do, the reason why I'm telling you to move, even though all of these changes and moves involve certain difficulties and challenges, it's la'anatcha letovatcha. It's for your benefit, for your good. Another very valuable lesson. Tests and challenges, even though they may be difficult, in the end, it's to our benefit. It's for some ultimate good. For example, the Brit Milah. When is he tested with Brit Milah, the circumcision? He's 99 years old. Imagine, Hashem could have told him, circumcise yourself at the age of 45. A lot earlier. Why did Hashem wait till 99? Obviously, there's, I'm sure, more than one explanation for it. But what is the Brit Milah? The circumcision is a mitzvah. It was not just a test. It was not just a challenge. Imagine everybody's making fun of him. He didn't do this at night when nobody was looking. He did this during the day, in public. So people were looking at him. What are you doing to yourself? You're harming yourself. What is this for? Who needs this? All kinds of questions. So all of this is a test. People try to dissuade you. And they're usually right, many, many times. So the fact that this happens at 99 tells us we never stop learning. We never stop growing. There's no such thing as pension, retirement in Judaism. You want to grow spiritually, you continue to grow throughout your life. You never stop, even at the age of 99. There will always be challenges. And all those challenges will be in order to elevate you further. Take, for example, people whose emunah, whose faith is not so strong. They believe in God, but their emunah is not very, very strong. If somebody insults them, makes fun of them, like with Abraham Avinu, they may take it very hard. People don't like to be insulted. People react very, very badly when people insult them or make fun of them. They don't realize that this ridicule is a test. Even though, obviously, those people are at fault, they shouldn't be ridiculing. It's a terrible offense. It's a sin to make fun of people. To cool them off from doing a mitzvah is a big sin. But we have to realize that if we're experiencing something like that, this is a test from above, this is a challenge for us. How are we going to react? How are we going to take it? Are we going to take revenge? Are we going to be physical? Are we going to verbally be abusive or not? Or are we going to keep quiet and accept it? Now, of course, you can defend yourself. You can do certain things to defend yourself, yeah. But how you take it, what's the attitude going to be? This is a test from above. They want to see what I'm going to do, how I'm going to react. So the stronger the emunah, the easier it is to contend with all these challenges. So this is what Abraham Avinu had to go through. And many, many Jews throughout their life had to deal with all kinds of challenges to their faith. Yeah, just to their faith, besides other challenges. The faith alone was not easy to continuously be devoted to one's faith, to be observant of the mitzvot under all kinds of difficult circumstances. Now, every generation has its own tests and challenges. There was a time in our history when the Jewish people in many communities were tested or challenged with Yehareg ve'al yavor. They had to let themselves be killed and not to commit certain transgressions. Even not too long ago, during the Inquisition, they were tested with that. Throughout our history, there were times that this was the test, that this was a challenge. Were you prepared to give up your Jewishness, the mitzvot, and assimilate, and if not, they would torture you to death. There were blood libels. Remember the blood libels? That the Jews somehow baked matzah with Christian blood. How could people even believe something like that? It's against our Torah to consume blood. And we should use that with baking a matzah. This was a test. This was a big challenge. Obviously, this also served as an atonement. The fact that we suffered meant that we had to atone for something. And our great rabbis tell us that that had to do to atone for Joseph being sold as a slave. What happened when he was sold as a slave? They took his shirt, what he was wearing, and they dipped it in goat's blood. Remember that story? That's what they sent home to their father to see. So there was some connection with blood from the very beginning. This is what brought about this baseless hatred between the brothers, which is unfortunately still around. Baseless hatred, sinat chinam. So that blood libel was to remind us, you haven't atoned for it yet completely. You haven't repented for that completely. There's still that baseless hatred amongst you. So if people would analyze the challenge, if they would pay attention, they would look into it, they may be able to figure out, why is this coming to us? Why are we being driven out of this country? We were loyal citizens, advisors to the king. We only brought benefit to the country. Why all this anti-Semitism till this very day? You have it in many countries. Why? Don't you realize that the Jews have contributed, that they are somewhat behaving themselves, hopefully, observing the laws of the land and their own mitzvot? But they didn't pay attention. They didn't realize that there was something that they were doing wrong. And this could be for many, many years, until the day came that they were punished. So even though the perpetrators will be held accountable, yes, of course, perpetrators will be held accountable for what they did, but the Jew had to learn from this. Maybe God wants something of me. This is not happening by coincidence. So you have all these speeches about anti-Semitism. Blame yourself first, before you blame others. It wouldn't happen. Yes, there are people who are jealous, there are people who are bigots, but if this thing gets out of hand, and they actually persecute you, then maybe you're at fault for doing something too. So the Jewish people have gone through all kinds of challenges throughout our history. There was a period of time when they had to give their life. That was their test. Let's see if you can hold on to your faith, even though it cost your life. There was another period in our history where we had to deal with the evil inclination of idolatry, Yetzer hara of avodah zarah. It was a big problem. We cannot understand this. How come they were so inclined or tempted to worship an idol? What is this idol? What did it do for them? It's nonsense. We think of it as nonsense, but we don't realize that if we had been living at that time, the greatest people fell for it. It must have had some power. People don't understand that there is a lot of power in impurity. There's something called witchcraft. And I have a few lectures about the powers of impurity. They exist, just like there is power in holiness. So, at one time, this was a big challenge, not to fall for it, to realize that this is all fake, this is not real, even though it is powerful. And now we're in the generation of Mashiach, and we have our own sets of challenges. Part of the challenges today, even though life is easier in many ways, and we don't have the difficulties of our forefathers, you can be Jewish, you can practice Judaism here. Most people won't bother you. You can be observant. There's kosher food even in Oklahoma City. Wherever you go. It's not a problem. In the past it was very difficult and challenging. So what is the problem today? Ta'avot. Desires. People have more money. So there are luxuries. So people want to have everything for themselves. It's a very materialistic society, and this brings its own set of challenges, materialism. A lot of problems that have to do with money. Families breaking up because of money. Everything is about money today. Materialism. And comforts. So this is a big challenge because all of these ta'avot, what they do is they weaken a Jew's connection to that which is spiritual in nature. The two don't get along, spirituality and physicality. So if one overemphasizes physicality and materialism, he becomes weaker in his devotion to the Torah and the mitzvot, to prayer. The prayer all of a sudden becomes cumbersome, difficult. He wants to rush through it. Let's get it over with. How could you get it over with? This is your appointment with God every morning, in the afternoon and evening. Don't you realize what you're doing there? Yeah, but they want to see the news. They want to see a movie. They want to go out to eat. That's their focus. That's what's important to them. That's their idol. This is the challenge today. They didn't have this years ago. When you were a child, were there any movies? Barely. I mean, I don't know about in Iran. Did they have in the 30s and 40s movies? I hear that in this country they had people went into with their car.
Food used to have them.
They had with their car. You know, you go in with a car to see a movie. Drive it. Today, you want to see a movie, you don't even have to see it on the theater, you don't even have to see it on the TV, you see it on your cell phone. Life has changed, the world has changed, the temptations are different than they were in the past. But the problem is, there were always temptations. Today, they're very dangerous. They remove one from focusing on what's really important, and that is that spiritual connection with Hashem, the service of God. The two cannot coexist, get along, even though you, of course, you're allowed to enjoy life. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to know that this is just a means to an end. It's not the end in itself, it's not the goal. But people have made this their idol. That means that they have made this their goal, the most important thing in their life. So this is a challenge. Somebody that has $1 million, well, $1 million is not enough today. Somebody that has $100 million, do you know that he has a big challenge in his hands? What are you going to do with that money? You're given $100 million. What are you going to do with that? Huh? You're probably going to say, God, take away my life, but don't take away my fortune. Yeah. Yeah, if we get stuck with all this money, they're not going to know what to do with it. It's a big challenge. A lot of people have told me, Rabbi, please pray for me that I should be wealthy. I'm telling you, I'll know what to do with the money. You say that now, but once you get the money, you're going to think differently. They don't realize that the evil inclination grows with the money too. If your money grows, the evil inclination will grow with it. And even though the person may have been giving once upon a time, he's going to become more and more stingy. I told you once a story of such an individual who asked the Chafetz Chaim, who asked the Rabbi, please bless me that I should succeed, that I should do well. I want to be wealthy. He said, why do you want to be wealthy? Because I want to do a lot of mitzvot. I want to really do a lot of acts of charity. And he was a very charitable man. He was. If I have more money, I'll do more. So the Rabbi told him, remember what you were promised. And he gave him a blessing. And sure enough, time went by and he became very successful. Years went by, and the more successful he became, the stingier he became. He became very stingy. He barely gave anything for tzedakah. One day he heard that this rabbi, the Chafetz Chaim, was visiting town, and he went over to him, and he began to cry. Rabbi, I don't know what happened to me. My hands are closed. They used to be open. I used to give easily. Now I can't. So the rabbi smiled at him and says, what do you think, that evil inclination that you had back then when you were not so rich would remain the same when your wealth grew? Your wealth grew, so did your evil inclination. The more you have, the more challenging it will be to do the right thing with this money. Hashem doesn't make it that easy. Give you a lot of money, and you're going to easily do all these mitzvot with all this. No. You're going to have some challenge. You want all this money, you're going to have a challenge. How to use the money. So it's not always such a great idea to ask for this kind of a challenge, because the vast majority of people who were given a lot of money, that's for some reason their mission, don't necessarily end up doing the right things with their money. They want to keep it for themselves, they spend it on their own family. They don't realize that God entrusted them to do something positive with that, but they can't, they don't know how to, or they don't want to. It's It's a big problem. We all have our personal challenges. It's customized to each individual what he has to accomplish in this lifetime. But we can all succeed if we decide to. It's not a challenge that we cannot succeed in. We can succeed. We can overcome all the difficulties if we choose to. But of course it takes some thinking, it takes some intelligence. One does not realize that this is a test or a challenge. He may not even try to deal with it. So today we have all kinds of temptations that our forefathers didn't have, and we don't have the temptations or the challenges that they had. Because the comforts that we have today and the easy life that many have is something that we are enjoying, something that we're experiencing. The results or the consequences of all this easy life is that many Jews, unfortunately, have moved away from being connected to Torah the way they were in the past. In the past, they were more studious, they devoted more time to learning Torah, they devoted more time to mitzvot. The pleasures of life and all the comforts have weakened many Jews' connection to Torah. And I'm going to share with you an old argument between two camps of Hasidim that relates to this. When Napoleon was about to invade Russia, there was one camp that said, one camp of Hasidim, and their leader, their rabbi, that said, we have to pray that Russia should win, and the other one said, we have to pray that Napoleon should win. What was the source of the machloket of their argument? The ones that held that Russia should win is that even though it's true that if Russia wins, the Jewish people will continue to be poor and suffer, second-class citizens, economically they won't be so prosperous, but at least the Russians won't interfere with our faith, with our emunah, at least not as much. If the French win, what's going to happen is, of course, the standard of living will go up wherever the French went. But along with the standard of living going up, so will the faith of the Jew, the Torah mitzvot, suffer as a result. In the end, of course, the French did not win. Thank God. But if you want to have an idea of what could have happened, just look at all the countries where there are Jewish communities, where the Alliance Française, where the French Alliance entered, was allowed to go in and influence the community. The Jewish community there suffered spiritually. A lot of Jews became less and less devout, less spiritual, less interested in Torah as a result of what the French culture emphasized. Yes. You can see, even in Iran, it was a problem in certain cities, wherever they were allowed. In some places they were not allowed to go in. I think in Shiraz they were not allowed. They didn't give them a foothold. In Morocco, they were very strong. In Iraq, they also came in. And the communities there suffered, the Jewish community. Spiritually speaking, it exacted a toll on them. So that is why you see the words by Brit Milah, by the circumcision, you see the statement of Hashem, Liot Lecha Elokim, I want to be unto you a God. By circumcising ourselves, even though the circumcision has more than one explanation, the circumcision is to remind us that He is our God. We belong to Him. It's not about belonging to a Republican Party, belonging to the Democratic Party, belonging to any party, belonging to the party of God. That is our main focus. So the circumcision was intended, amongst other things, to be a lasting imprint on the physical body so that we do not forget we belong to Him first and foremost, not to anybody else. So that is why Abraham Avinu, wherever he went, that's what he preached. Vayikra b'shem Hashem, he called out in the name of God. He says, this is what you should focus on. This is what you should embrace. Not materialism, not idols, not all these things. God, that should be a part of your life. This has to be taught. Even though people believe in it, not everybody is strong about it. That he's willing to do everything in order to go to a class, in order to learn more, in order to be more spiritual. People just enjoy the comforts, the physical comforts of life, and deprive their soul of the food that it needs too, the soul. However, as I said earlier, it's not enough to talk. It's important to practice what we preach. So a lot of people talk about these things. Yes, they learn about it, they talk about it, but they don't actually implement it in their business, in their behavior. See, if somebody really believes in God, has complete faith in God, he will hopefully act accordingly. He will be honest in business. He will treat people fairly, whether it's an employee or partners or suppliers. It makes no difference. That which we believe in, that which we talk about, we need to implement it. Otherwise, it's worthless in our business, in our behavior, in the way we conduct ourselves with people. Let me give you an example, a beautiful story that illustrates this point. There was once a Bachur Yeshiva. Bachur Yeshiva is a young man who studies Torah in the yeshiva for a number of years. These boys are usually serious, their emunah is usually strong, and hopefully they practice what they preach, they behave themselves. He once took a taxi. The driver was not a religious Jew, secular. And they got into a discussion about religion. The young man explained to the driver how beautiful it is, how important it is to learn Torah and so forth. Talked about the mitzvot. And it came time for him to get out of the taxi. And the taxi stopped, let him out, and he left. He forgot to pay. The young man forgot to pay the taxi driver. So as he was going to wherever he was headed, he realized that he forgot to pay, so he ran after the taxi. The taxi had already driven off. He figured, okay, I'll run a little bit farther, maybe I'll catch him at the next red light. He ran, he was getting close to the taxi, the light turned green, and he ran again. Every single time he almost caught up, the taxi got further and further away. By the time he finally caught up to the taxi must have been maybe a kilometer or two away from the original stop where he dropped him off. He finally catches up with the taxi and he knocks on the window, and the driver is surprised to see him. And he says, "I forgot to pay you." And the taxi driver was amazed at what this boy did, because he knows where he dropped him off, that he ran so far because he was honest to pay him what he owed him. And that was the end of that story. This young man once, years later, attended a lecture about Kiddush Hashem, the importance of sanctifying God's name, doing the right thing, impressing people that there's a God in this world by observing the mitzvot. And that's what the lecturer was talking about, how important it is that in our behavior that we conduct ourselves in a proper way so that we sanctify God's name. And at the end of the lecture, this young man raises his hand. I have a question. Yes, sanctification of God's name is so important that it has the potential to do a lot of good to people who see the actual deed. But how come we never end up seeing the good results of such an act? You know, we're told it's a good act, it's an important act, it's a big mitzvah, but how come we never end up seeing what are the good results that this brought about? The name of God was sanctified. So the lecturer turns to the young man and he says, "Don't you recognize me?" He says, "No. I'm the taxi driver that drove you years ago. I was so impressed by your honesty, by your devotion to Torah, to the mitzvah, that you ran so far to pay me back, that this is all I needed to give me the strength to do teshuvah and to return. And of course, once I did teshuvah, I went to study and eventually became a lecturer." Incredible story. Here, you see the results? It took a little bit of time. But it's interesting how God brought the two of them together. And he decided to go to this lecture. He saw some flyers and, this should be an interesting topic. Yes, we have to be careful with our actions because they can leave a permanent impression, hopefully a positive one, on people. At a later stage, God tells Avraham Avinu something very interesting. Avraham Avinu is already passing all the tests. Hitalech lefanai ve'yeh tamim. This is prior to the circumcision. He tells him, I want you to be complete. Complete? I might not complete now. So even though complete means with the circumcision, but it also means that your faith has to be complete without any holes whatsoever. So the simple understanding of for one to have complete faith means that the stronger one's faith is, the more pure it is, this individual, even if he goes through many, many challenging situations, he will not break. He will not, in other words, lose hope. Because of his faith, his strong faith, it's complete. Even if he goes through a difficult challenge, he will never lose hope. He will always be strong. That's a simple understanding of Tamim. Let your emunah be complete, regardless of the difficulty. In this merit, you will be saved. If one does demonstrate such complete faith, this could be a big merit for him. But I want to add two additional explanations for this idea of what it means to have complete faith in God. One is that faith, for it to be complete, needs to have bitachon, trust. We don't only believe in God, that He created the world, that He's behind certain things that happen in this world, but we trust Him. We trust Him that everything He does is for the good. We trust Him blindly, that He knows our thoughts. He knows what's best for us. A lot of people misunderstand what bitachon b'Hashem means, trust, and I have a whole lecture about the difference between emunah and bitachon. Emunah is one thing. A lot of people, thank God, believe in God, but do they trust Him 100%? Not so easily. And you should know trust is really a major problem between many men and women, husband and wife. A lot of differences can bring about a lot of friction in the house. Differences of opinion, difference in their mentality. One is from this country, one is from another country. There's all kinds of differences between men and women. And these differences between husband and wife can bring about friction. Okay, we've heard about that. But the differences in themselves, they usually do not make the marriage collapse. You know what could easily make a marriage collapse? If the trust is missing. If one cannot trust the other, if this trust has disintegrated, that is already a recipe for disaster. In the same way that a tooth receives nourishment from the root, right? We have roots in our mouth. The teeth have roots, unless you've had a root canal, right? They receive their nourishment from that. Their health depends on that. In the same way that they receive the nourishment from a root, the source or the root, the health of a marriage, depends on it being nourished by the trust that each one has for each other. So trust between a husband and wife is what provides for a healthy relationship. If that trust is gone, then the marriage is about to collapse. So in the same way that in a relationship between husband and wife, that trust is so important, the same is true with our relationship with God. Without trust, it's very, very incomplete. And that is why if you look at what Solomon says in Mishlei, when he describes a woman of valor, an Eshet Chayil, what makes a woman so special is Batach Bale Ba'ala, that if her husband can trust her in raising the children, trust her in family purity, trust her that she keeps a kosher home. He doesn't know, he's away. If he can trust her blindly, he's the happiest man, hopefully. That trust is so important. So that is partially what Hashem is asking for Avraham Avinu to do, is to have that complete trust. Not just emunah, but a complete trust in Him. Because many, many times we will not understand God's ways. It's difficult. Sometimes it really is difficult. We have to have complete trust that it must be for some ultimate good. And finally, there's another type of tmimut, another type of shlemut, of completeness that God asks of us. And that is to do things for His sake. Because He commanded us, not because we think it's the right thing to do. And there's a big difference between the two. When one thinks it's the right thing to do versus being told to do that by God. The rabbis tell us something very interesting. Gadol metzuveh v'oseh mimi she'eino metzuveh v'oseh. Greater is one that does something because he's commanded to do it than one who does it voluntarily on his own. I would think the opposite. I would think if someone, imagine a non-Jew, does a beautiful mitzvah on his own, he's not commanded, he deserves a lot of credit, perhaps more credit than the one who is commanded. He's not commanded, he's still doing it on his own. No, the rabbis tell us no. The one who's commanded is greater. Why is he greater? For various reasons. One who's commanded doesn't consider the fact that I may be tired or not, be in the mood or not to do it. I'm commanded to do it, I will do it regardless. If one is not commanded, he will not necessarily be encouraged to do something if he's tired or not in the mood. One who's commanded to do the mitzvah will do so even if it's difficult. I'm commanded to do it. So you see what happens here? The one who's commanded has a yetzer hara to deal with. He has an evil inclination. He has reason to resist sometimes. We all have reasons to resist, but because he's commanded and he overcomes that resistance, he's rewarded accordingly. He had to overcome the resistance that is there. The fact that Hashem is going to reward us for fulfilling the mitzvot doesn't mean that he's going to make it easy. There's going to be some stumbling blocks, there's going to be some things that are going to challenge us, and if we overcome them, and we do so regardless of the difficulties, we will be rewarded. So therefore he doesn't make it easy. One who's commanded will do so anyway, because he's commanded. One who's not commanded, if it's too difficult, then he's not going to do it. See, when people are not commanded, if it makes sense to them, they like it, they'll do it, but on condition that it's not too difficult. They're not commanded, then why should they do it? So there's a big difference between the two of them. One's commanded, I'm doing this for God, regardless of the difficulties, regardless of the challenge. So therefore, Abraham Avinu is being commanded, be complete, do it for my sake. Don't do it because you think it's a proper thing to do, it's a beautiful thing to do. I know you think so. But don't think like that, because there may be times where you may really be puzzled, as we will soon see in another parasha when he's told, bring your son Isaac as a sacrifice. Now what are you going to say? Do you like this one? You see what I mean? So Hashem is preparing him. Be complete in your faith, because there will be times you don't understand why I want of you to do something. So don't use your mind to overanalyze the situation. A lot of people make this mistake. A lot of great intellectuals, Jewish people, individuals, very, very smart people, who unfortunately moved away from Judaism, started their own brand of Judaism because they thought they were smart. They thought that they could use their intelligence to come up with an explanation or with a change that they thought was necessary, instead of being completely faithful to the word of the Torah, having trust that Hashem meant what He said forever, not that you can second guess Him and decide on your own. It's time for changes. No changes will be allowed, the Torah says clearly, because it anticipated there will be people who are very bright who will make this terrible mistake of using their intelligence to come up with some new ideas. So Abraham Avinu is being equipped with all that he needs to deal with the challenges. But the more important thing that is known about him, that we recall, of course, is not just the challenges that he passed successfully, but that he was the pillar of kindness. And that is why in our prayer we say Magen Abraham, not Magen Yitzchak, not Magen Yaakov, the shield of Abraham. This is the shield of the generation of Mashiach. And there was the exile, this long exile that we're in, which is about to finish, will finish in the merit of the pillar of Abraham. That's why it says the shield of Abraham, the pillar of kindness. And that is what we need to do. It will be through kindness that we can overcome selfishness, that we can overcome materialism. Only when we're kind, when we emphasize kindness and charity. Otherwise, people will continue to just focus on themselves and on the comforts of their life and not think and worry about others. Strengthen the kindness in your life and do for others, and this will help you shield yourself from all the ills of society today. Avraham Avinu, through this kindness, achieved his ultimate title. What was his ultimate title? Yireh Elokim, one who truly fears God. He's not given this title until the very, very end. After the Akedah, after he brings Yitzchak, after he agrees to bring his son Yitzchak as a sacrifice, even though in the end he was not brought as a sacrifice, but he agreed to it. And we'll talk about it then. No easy test. Once he's done that, he is complete. And he gets the title that God willing we should always have, that we should always get. One day that we should get, and that is the title of Yireh Elokim, of one who really fears God. That title you can only get if you really pass many, many challenges where God is able to say on you, yes, I see, you've done it not because that's your nature, you've done it because I asked of you to do so. And you succeeded, you get the title of Yireh Elokim. Kindness, real kindness is not only done when things are easy for us, real kindness is done even if it's difficult for us. Sometimes to be kind is very difficult. We're just going to finish with an incredible story that illustrates this point of how true kindness is something that you don't see by everyone. Only one who really believes in it and understands its value. There was once a great rabbi who asked of heaven to please reveal to him who will be sitting next to him in Olam Haba in the world to come. And he told him in a dream, this butcher who lives in that town. So he went, traveled to that town to see what kind of a guy this butcher is. He's a butcher, he's not learned, but he must have done something very special. And he met the butcher and he asked him, tell me, have you done some special mitzvah in your life? And the butcher says, not really, I'm just a businessman, I'm a butcher. But perhaps think about something special that you did once upon a time that really stood out. And he says, yes, there is one thing that I remember that was special. I once ransomed a Jewish girl. She was taken captive by some gangs, and I paid the ransom and redeemed her from captivity. She was a young girl and had no parents, no family, so I raised her in my house like my daughter. When the time came for her to get married, I approached my son and asked him, would you marry her? I'll provide you with everything you need. The two of them agreed to get married. And the date was set, a big wedding. Everybody was invited in the community. A house was prepared for them. The furnishings were prepared for them. And as they're getting ready for their wedding, the father of the bride notices that there's a young, poor boy who's crying. He goes over to him and says, can I help you? You need anything? Why are you crying? And he tells the father of the bride, that girl was my kala, was my fiancée many, many years ago. But we got separated because of the wars. And, that's why I'm crying. So the father goes over to the son and says, listen, this is the story, this is what happened. She used to be once engaged. Are you willing to let go of her so she can marry her original groom and give over to her everything that I've given you? And the son said, yes. Daddy, if you tell me to do so, I will do so. And, of course, the father went ahead and married this girl to her original fiancé and gave them everything. Not only the wedding, the festivities, the house and the furnishing, everything that he was going to give his own son to somebody that was not really his daughter. This is a real act of chesed. Now you can understand why he would be sitting next to this great rabbi in the world to come. To be sitting next to him, he must have done some great mitzvah. A very unselfish act that he didn't need to do, but nonetheless, he did so. That is true chesed. We should never ask God to test us. We don't want tests. We don't know how well will we do. But if we do come across that we're in a situation that is very challenging, we should pray to Hashem that He should help us, B'ezrat Hashem, that we should succeed in all the tests. Amen.